If you've been following me or watched just a few of my slingshot videos, you'll have likely noticed I'm a huge fan of the slotted hole method for flat band attachment. In this video, I'll reveal my actual process for easily making slotted holes in your slingshot frames. After I take you through that process, I'll show you the refinements I use to tweak the slotted holes to make your slingshot look more professional, as well as help your bands to wear better at the attachment. This is the jig or carrier I made to help me cut the slots in my fork tips. It's made out of gazillion layer birch plywood, about an inch thick, but you can glue up anything or even use a 2x4. It needs to be perfectly square with the bandsaw table, both on the side as well as the saw end. Mine is about 3.5 inches by 5.5 inches, but 4x6 would be perfectly fine. I used a piece of 1/4-inch plywood screwed to the saw end to butt the fork tips of the slingshot up against. If you'll notice, my slingshot frames are basically square-edged blanks at this stage. They've been laminated and cut out, then either sanded with a reciprocating drum sander or flush cut with a template on my router table using a flush cutting router bit and a guide bearing. I have a video involving that process in the works. I've made a mark here on this fork tip about 5/16 of an inch from the corner. I want to make sure that frame is pushed all the way down to the table and butted up against that piece of plywood on the end. Now I'm going to clamp that to the carrier. Everything looks good. It's nice and stable and square. That brings up another point I need to make. You need to make absolute certain that your table is square with your bandsaw blade. Trust me on that one. I absolutely know what happens when you don't have your table square with your bandsaw blade. I'm using the black liner as a guide as to where my slot is going to be, but it's about 3/8 of an inch from the back edge of the slingshot frame. I'm just going slowly and straight. But remember, I'm only going to cut about 5/16 of an inch deep. Let's go over this again with another Nighthawk. Make sure it's pushed flush against that end piece, as well as pushed down against the table. Hold it tight against the carrier until you get that clamp securely in place. Now we're good to go. My bandsaw blade is a 1/4 inch with about 10 teeth per inch, I believe, if I remember correctly. We're going to saw slowly and carefully. Again, I'm using that liner as my guide, but you can draw a line. I draw a line in some of my solid wood slingshots. I don't recommend using a saw blade that's thicker than this, unless, of course, the bands that you intend to use on your slingshot are at least, say, 1 millimeter thick. Now we're ready to head over to the drill press. I've got a big scrap block of walnut clamped to my drill press table, about 5/16 of an inch from the center of that drill. And I line up that slot perfectly. This is another reason why I like to do this with square edges of my slingshot frame blank, because I can get it square on that table and butt it up against that block. And by the way, I'm using an 1/8 inch bit. If I use any bigger bit, then the slotted hole has difficulty holding on to the band as tightly as if I just use this smaller hole. You can try different sizes and see how you feel. I tried one that was just a hair bigger than 1/8 of an inch, and I didn't care for it. I'm just lining the tip of that drill bit up with the slot itself. But the slot does help the drill bit to kind of find where it wants to be. Just make sure that you don't drill down into your finger. It's a fairly simple and straightforward process. And one of the reasons why I do it at this stage is because it's easier to do while the frame is square, as I said a while ago. Now I can go to the router table and start rounding this off and then start carving. But we're not done with this video yet. I told you I'd show you some tips on refining those slotted holes. I prefer to do this after I've shaped and sanded the frame, but before I apply the finish. Starting with a triangular file, I'm going to make a few passes in the slots of both fork tips. The triangular file bevels an angle of 30 degrees on each side of the slot. Our objective is to round over the edges of those slots. Before I started doing that, the sharper edges were abrading my bands quite a bit. Now they don't abrade them at all. Once we're done with the triangular file, we're going to switch to a square file. That'll provide us with a bevel of 45 degrees on either side of the slot. Both of those files used in a combination will give us a nice rounded edge of those slots. My files are fairly fine, as you can see. I don't want to get too aggressive or too carried away. We need a certain amount of edge to contribute to the holding power of our slotted holes. We just don't want that edge to be sharp enough to cut through our bands. One thing that happens when drilling, the drill bit leaves a bit of a ragged edge at the bottom of each of those slots. So the next step is going to involve a Japanese saw just to clear out some of the rough edges. You could actually do this anytime in this refinement process. I just happen to be doing it now, and it doesn't take much. But now I'm going to pick up this 1/8 inch rat tail file. It's pretty fine, and that just helps me really clean that up quite a bit. Here I'm using a sheet of 180 grit sandpaper that I've folded just to double up, and that's what I'm using down through the slot just to really clean up the slot itself. And I'll go back and forth a little bit if I need to, just so that I don't have any ragged edges down in there that keeps me from being able to slip my band down in there when I'm installing them. Using a spherical diamond burr in my flexible shaft tool, I'll bevel the edges of the holes on either side of each fork tip. I think it's a nice detail and kind of rounds off that sharp edge of the drilled hole. I hope this video helped to illustrate my process of creating slotted holes, and I hope it inspired you to try it yourself. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Drop me a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of these videos. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.